Good evening. This is one of the first virtual meetings that the City of St. Paul has run for the park at Westgate. And we're here tonight to talk about the design. My name is Liz Hickson. I am a landscape architect with St. Paul Parks and Recreation's Design and Construction Division. I have 8 years of experience in landscape architecture practice, 4 of those years as a licensed professional. And we're going to try to keep tonight's presentation brief so that we can save time at the end for a survey and a live poll about this park, and also reserve as much time as we can for questions and answers. So I'm going to begin and start rolling here, but please remember to use the chat feature to ask a question and or raise your hand if you would like to speak in the meeting. So thank you. As a side note, happy Groundhog Day. It somehow seems fitting that we are doing a virtual meeting, and today is Groundhog Day, where the movie talks about everything being the same and repeating. And that's a lot of how our lives have been since we've been in this pandemic. So I know people have made decisions to make this meeting part of your evening. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for taking time out of your day to show that you care about St. Paul parks and the parks in your neighborhood. So my supervisor, Ann Gardner, is also on this call. She will be helping to moderate questions and join in the question and answer period. And so I will pause every few moments to have Ann review any questions that have come up so that we can make sure we're addressing them in a timely manner. As we start the meeting, I want to make sure that we have the same expectations for everybody, that we can make this meeting run smoothly. A link has just been posted to the meeting chat to sign in. We're using that to track your attendance at this meeting, and also so that if you have follow-up questions, we can use that to contact you. So please do sign in. That link again is in the chat for the sign in. And it's also on this screen for a QR code. If you have a phone or tablet handy, you can photograph that and it should take you to the same link that's in the chat. I also want to acknowledge that we may have people either on this call or in the area who would like translation assistance to better understand this park. We have Parks and Recreation staff that we can pull together to hold a specific meeting with a smaller group for a specific language. If you would like to request translation, please email me. My email address is at the top of this screen, and it will be shared multiple times throughout this presentation. Or if you are able, please chat us and we will do our best to respond. The meeting agenda for tonight is to briefly run through an introduction and goals of this project, to review the project timeline so far, to look at the context of this park at Westgate and the views that you see from this one block park, look at some of the area plans that have been developed by the city and our partners and others for this area. Look at the historic site context, what we can find of this site history, review the park design, and then give everybody on the meeting a chance to share your thoughts, your feedback, and ask questions in a live question and answer. So again, the goals of this meeting are to review those previous plans and concept designs shared by the city and our partners, present the revised plan incorporating feedback received to date, and gather feedback on the revised design, which we'll be reserving time at the end of the meeting for, and then review next steps, what will be going forward and what's the timeline that you can expect as neighbors of this park for park construction and other communications from the city. So at this point, I'd like to quickly break and see if there are any questions or comments that have come in. Anne, are you seeing anything?
There was one question about whether or not signing in with a phone number would be sold or shared. And as Liz had mentioned, we're only interested in getting an understanding of who's attending, and then we would have your contact information to provide follow-up related to this project only. So if you're not comfortable sharing your phone number or email address, you do not need to. We just would like to have an account of who is attending tonight. So again, thank you for being here.
All right, thanks, Anne. So with that, we'll move on, but I will break again for questions in a few moments. This park has a rather long history where various people in the neighborhood and the city government have worked to develop a park in this area. From 2008 to 2017, there were various plans, which I will go through momentarily in a little bit more detail. They're also available on the project website, which I will share a link to that soon. Around 2018 or so, we have agreement with Dominium to get this one block parcel of land and some partial construction funding that was transferred to the city in accordance with a city ordinance about parkland dedication. In December of 2019, there was an initial community engagement session, a meeting with St. Anthony Park Community Council and I believe the Land Use Committee. Two concepts and a phasing idea was shared at that meeting. Then in 2019, a revised concept was shared and there was a community update at another St. Anthony Park Community Council meeting. But later that summer, about fall 2019, we heard from the developer that construction was not complete on the Legends at Millbury and Millbury Apartments, Legends at Berry Apartments buildings. And so the one block park parcel that we are waiting on was not ready for construction yet. So at that point, the city informed St. Anthony Park that we would expect construction to occur in 2021. So the next section in this green, these two green boxes here are kind of where we are now and where we're headed. In summer 2020, the site became available. The developer took off the trailers that probably many of you neighbors have seen out on the site over the last couple of years. And then this winter is now where we are currently. We're ready to present this design to you, and we're heading into developing construction documents and bidding. And we anticipate that park construction will occur in spring through fall of this year, pending any further review or more meetings. And then in the future, there's a lot of potential for this park and a lot of exciting connected things. Especially notable is the Park 2 or trail parcel that the city does own a significant portion of. It's a piece that can connect from Berry Street out to Wabash Avenue and over to the St. Paul Grand Rounds. I will speak about that in more detail later on in this presentation. But we see that as a future opportunity for this project and for leveraging some of the momentum we have for this project and creating an even better connection for your neighborhood and for all residents, both in Minneapolis and St. Paul, for the bike network. To give you a bit of context, this park is about 1.5 acres. This plan shows the location of where Westgate Park or the park at Westgate is located. It's right along, if you can see in red on this slide, that's the city line between St. Paul and Minneapolis. And to the south of this park, we have a future residential zone that we're waiting to, that we're waiting to hear more details about. This piece in green is the additional area that we're that we are planning to talk about later. That's the Park 2 or trail that would connect to Wabash Avenue. I'm going to pause for 1 second. I'm seeing some questions coming through. Thank you for responding, Anne. And one thing we've heard about the park is that Emerald Street tends to carry faster, heavier traffic. And most of the streets immediately around Westgate Park are, for now, pretty quiet. But as future residential gets built up, we expect there to be more traffic in the area. We know that the street between Legends at Berry and Millbury Apartments has a fair amount of parked cars and is in high demand for parking spots. We also know that for now, at least, the two streets on the south and east sides of this park are lower traffic and quieter. And we'd expect that to continue until adjacent developments are completed. And one other thing to note is as you are on this park, you can see the new buildings at Millbury Apartments and Legends at Berry to the northwest. And you can see a desired connection that we heard about from the station area plan dating back to 2008, that the neighborhood really wanted a connection eastward to the Sunrise Bank building and to Curfew Street. And also looking south, you can see the former rail lines and the former building foundations that were here when this was the Weyerhauser factory and lumber site. In addition to those views, two things that dominate this park are views along Emerald up to the KSTP tower. And if you look south, you can also see another radio tower across the highway towards the river. And then looking east along Myrtle towards the Sunrise Bank building, there's a cell phone tower, and you can also see some of the adjacent properties like the assisted living or supportive living solutions building right there. I'm going to briefly review the plans to date. As I mentioned, that eastward connection to Sunrise Bank's lot was first mentioned in the Westgate Station area plan. And we will be sharing this presentation on our project website, and it will be emailed to anyone who shared their email on the sign-in for this meeting. So you'll have these links directly. The Westgate Station area plan identified a lack of outdoor space in this neighborhood in this section of the city, partly due to the historic dominance of large buildings and industrial uses that were in the nearby area. And it also set a framework for turning this area into a transit-oriented development. We knew that the light rail was coming, and we wanted to be prepared and develop a plan where this could be a denser area but have amenities accessible by bus or train. And that relates to the idea of transit-oriented development, that you might choose to live in an area like this because you would like to be able to use transit and not use your car for every trip. And then in 2013, there also was a related report about stormwater solutions for transit-oriented development that put out a vision of an additional green space in this area that at that time was called Curfew Commons, and it was a larger vision than what we're able to achieve today, but it still set the framework for making sure we think about stormwater when we talk about development along the Green Line. And then in addition, we have the 2014 Greening the Green Line plan, which looked carefully at all of the Green Line stations and noted areas where there would be a potential for a deficit or not enough green space. And Westgate was identified as one area, one region of the city where a park definitely would be needed. And then in addition to that, as a follow-up in 2017, a public realm plan was initiated and produced by Urban Design Associates, who was contracted to the city of St. Paul. And that report is what generated this graphic you're seeing on the screen right now, looking at the green arrows showing bike routes and connectivity. We added a green box for the Westgate Park and the green arrow showing the connection of the future Wabash Trail. That report really gave a framework and a layout to the park that we have today, the 1 block, 1.5 acre Westgate Park. So with that, I'm going to pause. I am seeing a number of questions popping up in the chat. It sounds like some people may be having a little bit of trouble viewing the plans and viewing the presentation, but hopefully we're able to resolve that. And if not, we will be sharing the presentation, and this is being recorded, so we will be sharing the video. Anne, are you seeing any questions that we should pause for?
Not at this time, unless someone wants to raise their hand and make a comment.
I'm not hearing any comments, so we'll keep moving in the interest of saving time at the end for questions, but there will be one more break before we get to the end, so thank you. So from these area plans, we have concepts that were developed from that 2017 Westgate Public Realm Plan. There were 2 concepts shown that were based on the ideas of the 1 block park that we've been talking about. And the concepts, kind of the main ideas of these 2 and the main differences between them were the idea of the flexible lawn and the rolling mounds. The flexible lawn concept was basically leaving as much flat open space for free recreation or picnics or frisbees or fitness in the parks type activities, leaving it unprogrammed and open. The rolling mounds idea was about getting more height and more elevation into this park, knowing that it's relatively flat, giving it some more sense of interest that way. And both concepts employed this idea of a Berry Festival Street, which Berry Street runs north-south from University, and right now it doglegs around the park into Van Buren and then Emerald Street. But the original vision of this urban design plan and public realm plan was to have Berry Street bring some activity to this park by being a festival street for food trucks. And the companion program or plan with that was having shaded seating along the street. And then adjacent to that, there was a trailhead planned for the corner of Myrtle Avenue and Berry Street, which is that east-west connection to the Sunrise Bank building. In 2019, the city took those plans and developed some additional concepts that built off of the rolling mounds and flexible lawn ideas and provided a framework for phasing where these plans could be built out over multiple phases, because we knew at that time that we didn't have funding to do everything that the neighborhood dreamed of having. And after those concepts were presented, we heard from the community that a strong desire was to have the first phase be done soon and get the park open, but do a basic park with trees and benches and open space, and then work towards fundraising for the wish list items or the vision park items. And so in more detail, those park concept plans had a couple different phases that were recommended with them. where in concept A, for example, phase 1 was planned to be the Berry Festival Street, which I was describing earlier, for food trucks and seating, and potentially a pavilion or shade structure. And then in the second concept with rolling hills, phase 1 was envisioned to include those rolling hills and build them first, and then phase in additional pieces such as a play area and seating and a small pavilion as we were able to identify additional funding. As I was starting to say, we did hear in 2019 that there was an idea put forward of building the park as a basic, simple park and then adding to it as funds allowed. These two concepts were running with that assumption. And in November 2020, when we presented these concepts, mostly the bottom concepts, to St. Anthony Park Community Council, we received various feedback, which we are now having our design respond to. That feedback included activating the northwest corner, which would be up here, which would be the corner of Emerald Street and Myrtle Street. Create more internal pathways, make sure it's not just one big green block, give it some interest. Use native plants as a buffer, especially at Emerald and Van Buren Street. Create a place for respite and create a space for quiet seating and getting away from the city. Emphasizing softscape and native plantings, and to do our best to screen the views of the cell phone tower, and to include meaningful poetry or art or sculpture that references something about this site or about nature. We also heard pretty strongly that the festival street, because the street was not able to be built with food trucks and things like that in mind, that maybe the idea no longer needs to be given so much space on the site.
Liz, this is Anne. If you want
Sure.
to take a minute, Ted Lee had a question about the northeast corner. I think it's about your first bullet point. It says activate the northwest corner. If you want to explain that and then clarify if you do mean northeast corner or northwest corner. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. That's a great question. The city had decided that the northeast corner was important to emphasize because of the adjacency to the future trail along the eastern side, and also because of the perceived extra traffic from Millbury Apartments and Legends at Barry Apartments to the north. So we had looked at the northeast corner as being the place to put the park sign and other amenities that say, welcome, you are here. But the feedback we received from St. Anthony Park was also that Emerald Street and Myrtle Street and Sharon Street in Minneapolis are important access points as well. And so we need to provide some access and some point of entry from that corner. And so the design that we're going to go into in just a moment here does activate that corner more than the two that you're seeing on the screen right now.
And then Liz, one more question for you from Roger Purdy. Is brick paving part of any concept? And when did the Festival Street concept go away?
That's a great question. I think the Festival Street went away sometime in 2018 or 19 as this was going through site plan review. I believe part of it is that we were not able to find a way to successfully design the street to have mountable curbs where a food truck could drive up and partially park on a curb and then allow cars to go around it. So the city wasn't able to support that design direction. And Anne, can you remind me of the second part of the question? It was about bricks, I believe. We are open to feedback about bricks. The city, especially in downtown, does not have a good track record with bricks. surviving heavy salting. So we don't tend to use pavers or bricks just due to maintenance concerns and trip hazards, because we have to design for something that will last 20 years or longer. And I don't want to go into too much detail about that, but if you feel strongly about bricks, I encourage you to write that in as feedback during the survey or speak about it at the end. Is there anything else? Okay. All right. So with that, we've talked through the area plans and what's been done to date. We've talked through the various plans that have been shown to the community. And now I'm going to move into talking more about the site and what we have envisioned for this park. So one thing to note about this park is that it sits right at the edge of both Twin Cities. We know that people who use this park and people who are on this meeting are probably from Minneapolis and St. Paul. And furthermore, I want to acknowledge that this land has a long history, longer than we can know. From glaciers carving the nearby river gorge to the First Nations that were here long before settlers or pioneers. And we know that St. Paul sits, and Minneapolis too, sits on the ancestral land of the Dakota and the Anishinaabe peoples, among others, and that we have much to learn of this story and this place going further back. The earliest that we have of this site, are very old maps indicating marshes and things like that, but this aerial is the first kind of concrete image we have that shows this block park in more detail. To give you context, this is from 1937, and you can see the University of Minnesota East Bank. You can see the, if you're able to zoom in later, I encourage you to do so, but you can see the Minneapolis industrial area and the Midway transfer yard that are these giant rail processing areas where lots of goods were brought in and out. And then you can see, as you zoom a little bit in, the Weyerhauser factory buildings. And I've indicated this green box for where the park is that we are talking about. As you zoom closer in, these are those same factory buildings, which we're pretty confident are the Weyerhauser lumber buildings. I've labeled the Court International building because that was already standing in 1937, and it is a landmark nearby. But I've also traced where a lot of the rail lines that used to service this area and carved through the park, where those were going. And I believe that those are an important kind of framework for this park, and they set up a way to kind of access and break down the block that we have. And they're a reference to something that was here before. And this is what leads to the design framework for this park. In addition to that, this is a great old aerial photo of the Weyerhauser lumber yards. And you can see, I've also superimposed the green area of where this park sits now. You can see a former building that was sitting just south of the park. We believe the remnants of the foundation of that are still standing adjacent to the future trail where there's a concrete area. And you can also see all of the lumber stacks that were nearby, that were that were used and brought here by Weyerhauser for sale. So the picture on the left shows the lines of the trains that were on this site before the construction of Legends at Berry and Millbury Apartments. And you can actually see the KSTP tower standing in the distance in this photo. And on the right-hand side is a photo of the Midway transfer yards in St. Paul, giving a sense of what this place would have been like around the turn of the century. And the interesting lines and the intersecting paths that the rail lines created as they arced through the landscape. Using these lines has a dual purpose. It acknowledges the industrial past of these sites, but it also, at least I think, acknowledges that the industrial use is not the first use of this site. And by putting in native vegetation and hopefully meaningful artwork, we'll be able to evoke a feeling of a Minnesota landscape that's relevant and appropriate for this site. Using that building footprint to the south and that arcing rail line, we created a spine for the park that we believe kind of anchors the park and divides it into smaller spaces that make it more human-sized and more comfortable. This slide is talking mostly about the plant palette that we're envisioning to use. We have 3 plant communities that we're evoking. I don't want to say that we're going to be able to fully make a native ecosystem, but that we can use representative plants from northern Minnesota hardwood forest and a coniferous forest, and then also use plants representative of a short grass savanna to kind of create 3 distinct zones within the park. We're also proposing to use a bee lawn for most of the green space toward the center so that it's an eco-friendly and pollinator-friendly area. To talk about the way that we're dividing up the space, again, you can see that central spine with 2 gray lines next to it. We have salvaged rail lines from this site that were saved by Dominium and the people who built Legends at Berry. And we are planning to reinsert those into the site as a edger for the planting area and the forested areas along the eastern side, but also as a way to call back to the fact that there's more here before us and that this site has a longer past. And we're also using the arcing paths that represent those rail lines to divide. And so the east side will have the 2 picnic groves. We're using the word grove because they'll have trees around the picnic benches. In the center, we're proposing to build a mound that opens to the south to get warm sun and provides a little bit of height to the center of the park. Just to the north of that, we're recommending a play area, and a play area that would be distinct from Chirgozi Park that's down the street. And then along Emerald Street, knowing that there's busier traffic, we're proposing to use plants as a buffer. And then in that northwest corner, looking to provide a place for public art, which we'll be talking about what that art could be later in this meeting. And getting back to that earlier question, in the northeast, we'd be paving a larger area as a welcoming area for the park that would connect to the future trailhead to the east. Zooming in a little further, we are looking to make sure that those picnic groves each have 2 picnic tables in them and a grill, and that those would be areas that you can come with your family. And we've heard from a few members of the community that a lot of the adjacent newly built apartment buildings and condominium complexes don't allow you to have a barbecue grill. Some may, some might not, but if this park can provide it, that's a space for gathering outside of your home, and St. Paul is able to at least provide grills here. And in terms of the 2 corners up towards Myrtle Street, we're looking at having art and trash receptacles on both corners, and also providing bike racks on the side closer to the future trail so that it's an amenity and a place to rest. And then as I was mentioning earlier, most of the park would be covered in a bee lawn or open lawn mix. And to buffer along Emerald Street, we'd have a double row of trees and a short grass savanna planted underneath. I am seeing a number of questions, so I think we will pause here. And this is showing what we believe we can accommodate in phase 1. We may have to edit down some benches before we get into construction, but I think this is something we'll be able to build in this first phase. And we also will be looking to get your feedback on what a priority item would be for phase 2 when we get to the feedback and the survey at the end. I'm seeing
Liz,
a number of questions. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to moderate here. So I've been trying to respond. This is Ann Gardner, by the way. I work with Liz, for those of you who missed the introduction. I've been trying to respond to the questions coming through, but one that you might want to touch on, Liz, is what is the mix of trees you are proposing? And then a second question about, is there anything related to stormwater management, clean, store, or reuse?
Those are great questions. Thank you. The trees, we are going to work with St. Paul Forestry to identify what the boulevard trees ringing the park should be. One standard thing that St. Paul Forestry prefers is to not have all the same species along one street. It provides more resilience in the face of future things like the emerald ash borer or Dutch elm disease. So we'll be working with St. Paul Forestry to identify the correct species. But in the hardwood forest, you can expect probably some aspens and oaks. In the double row of trees and shortgrass savanna, we envision types of oaks as well. In the coniferous forest, we'd be looking to do some white pines and some other types of spruces, like a Black Hill spruce or something similar, and probably some red pines. But we can share a more refined list with the community as we get further into development. I think we're here tonight to just make sure this is heading in a direction that solves, that serves most of the community's needs, and then we can refine a few of those details in the coming month.
Liz, a couple more questions. If you could touch on that stormwater management question, and then follow up to that, how is, are you seeking watershed grants?
Those are great questions. Right now, our plan is to try to get this park built in 2021, and so a watershed grant would be better employed in a phase 2 or later phase. One area that we've identified for nearer term implementation of that would be along the trail. There's a significant low point along the trail towards the storage facility, and we would want to make sure we can use best management practices in that area and potentially use stormwater funds to make that trail the best it can be. And so we can revisit that issue, that comment, but I think for this phase of the park, we are looking to, we'll do a study of the soils and make sure that everything drains properly, and look for stormwater to be employed in a future phase.
Okay, Liz, there's a couple more questions coming through too about plant species in terms of prairie native species. Are you using those, or what about more of them? And then are there plans to institute more native plants outside of trees and shortgrass in phase 1? I have more questions, but let's start with those first.
Okay. So I think in the hardwood forest and the coniferous forest, we would look to have some type of understory that would be appropriate, but not block views. I think we have to balance considerations of sightlines across this park with what we can manage and what our maintenance and operations teams are able to successfully keep looking healthy in a heavily used urban park. So I think we can provide more details about plants, but yes, we are thinking about more diversity in the planting materials and more diversity of heights of plants as we move into more detailed design. I think that's a great comment. And then Anne, what was the second part?
Let's see, plans to institute more native plants, trees, and shortgrass.
I think we can potentially make the shortgrass area a little bit wider. We're trying to balance out keeping enough of a green, big open space to allow people to play with kids or have yoga in the park or events like that or movies in the park, with making sure that there's a broad enough area of native plants and shortgrass prairie plants. I think we won't be able to really maintain that like you would with fire or any type of in-depth maintenance regime. So we're going to have to work with our natural resources team to carefully select a plant mix that they're able to maintain and we can keep looking good out here.
Okay, Liz, one more question, and then let's move on for the rest of your presentation and then come back to the other questions. So Allison asked, what have you learned about the people who live around the park and how has that affected the design? And then another question that somewhat relates to this, but do you have enough room for all of these amenities? So let's answer that question and then move on through the rest of your presentation.
Sure. So we know that the nearby area is growing rapidly and that a lot of new buildings have been built in the last couple of years. I don't have the number in front of me, but we counted, I don't know, 700 or 800 new units in the last 10 years that have been built, both in condos and apartments in the area. We also know that there are a lot of younger families in the area who want a space to be able to walk with their children. And we've heard too that there's a pretty significant East African population. And some of the people in that community have a small play area in their building, but that we need more space for kids and young adults to run around and be kids. And right now, there's just a general lack of green open space in the nearby area. So we're trying to address those needs by providing a park this year. And I'm seeing a few more comments popping up.
The second part of the question was, do you have enough room for the amenities that you're proposing?
Yes, we are confident that what we're proposing here will fit on the site. This plan is drawn to scale and is kind of already set for the space we have. So we're pretty confident that that the amenities we're showing on these last three plans, the program that we're showing in this slide and the native plant communities that we're showing here on this slide, those will all fit on in this one block park. And so with that, I'm going to move on so that we can reserve time at the end to address the remainder of the questions, knowing that we've already taken a little bit longer than we were anticipating to go through these slides. So for that northwest corner we were talking about and the potential public art, we're suggesting these options, but you'll see later on that we ask for your feedback. We have the potential of using train rails as sculptural elements Or one idea that has been floated is to use wood and reference the Weyerhauser lumber and do it in an artistic way. We also have the potential to add durable site furnishings that the city would typically put in a park like this. And then in the playground toward the center of the park, we really like this globe climber structure, and we know that it will fit here. And we like the idea that the wood references the former history of the site, but it's also natural and provides a unique feature that's different than the Minneapolis parks nearby and the St. Paul parks nearby. We'd also look to provide a mounded area within the play zone for either climbing or running or sitting. And so these are examples of other parks that have mounds of this type. One is at Jimmy Lee. Another one is here in St. Paul at St. Clair. That's the green park you're seeing towards the top of the screen. And then the idea of climbing on a mound from Railroad Park in Birmingham, Alabama. And then lastly, I wanted to touch a little bit more about the connection to Wabash Avenue. This slide highlights where the park is and then that trail connection. You see Highway 94 in the left-hand corner, and then to the bottom left corner of this slide is the 280 on-ramp. And we would be looking to pursue DNR local grant funding for constructing this trail. The city has begun to pull together an application to support the first steps of building that trail, and we'll update you as we know more. It can take a while to get feedback and get confirmation that we will or will not receive a grant. So that's one thing we're hoping for. And then I really do appreciate the suggestions of the local watershed district, applying to them and seeing if we can do something with stormwater along this trail or in the adjacent in the portion of the trail that runs along Berry Street. We might be able to do some kind of linear feature that treats water. So next, we're moving to the portion of the presentation where we invite you to share your thoughts. We're going to paste into the meeting chat a link to vote, and then later on in the meeting, we will share the results of that vote. The city knew initially that this park was named Westgate only because the station nearby was named Westgate. We don't know that Westgate is an appropriate name for this park, and we want your input on what you think this park should be called. And we had asked previously from St. Anthony Park Community Council to give us suggestions, and in 2019 we did receive a couple name suggestions. So when you click on that link, you'll see names that have been previously brought up by the district council. But there's also a place where you can type in your own idea. So if you have a great idea or something you think is appropriate, feel free to send it in. Again, please type your questions into the meeting chat, and we'll begin the question and answer period after this. If you raise your hand and you're comfortable, please turn on your camera when you're speaking and speak slowly and clearly. And then we will be sharing later on an online survey link for this project. That survey will ask for your input on what the public art could be, what the play components, which of the play components you like, what your priority for this park would be, and then also to vote on the park name again. So for that, we'll keep that online survey open for 2 weeks. We'll share the link both in this meeting and on our website. And then we will take that feedback into account and refine the design and update the community, update the design and revise our timeline accordingly if needed. We're accepting community comments on the plan. We will send it through St. Anthony Park, and ask for written comments. And then, assuming that enough people are positive about this park design and our response to your feedback, we will move into developing construction documents and then bringing this project to get bid on by local contractors in hopes that we can roll into providing you a park by the end of 2021 or later, ideally later this summer, but you can never guarantee construction timelines and weather. So with that,
Liz,
yep.
I have a few more questions for you if we can keep rolling with that.
Sure.
Catherine had asked, how do your tree plants meet the needs of the changing climate pressure?
Great question. I think we will work with our forestry group, but St. Paul has been developing plans to plant more climate resilient trees that are from slightly southern areas that are more likely to survive and thrive in our urban environment as temperatures increase and become more unpredictable. So we will definitely pick plants and trees that we know are durable but also adaptable.
Okay, another question is about nature play. This was mentioned at previous meetings. Can you mention or can you speak to that as a desired play area option? And then the next question is, could you talk about lighting infrastructure pieces?
Sure. The play area piece, I think we feel that the globe structure we're showing meets some of the criteria for a natural play, but in general, St. Paul, we need to make sure whatever we put in the park is durable and maintainable. And so I think if there are strong feelings about nature play, as in having pieces of trees and rocks and things like that out on the site, I would welcome your written feedback in the survey and later on in this conversation. We have heard that from a few people, but it hasn't been an overwhelming comment yet. So please speak up about nature play. And then I apologize, there was one more question.
The lighting, could you talk
Lighting.
about lighting in the park, either within or around the park?
So currently the park has one or two lights on each of the street facing sides, typical St. Paul street light fixtures. And so we'd be looking to keep those on the exterior. In order to achieve the budget that we have for this park, we are not at this point aiming to add interior lighting to the park. Technically, most of our St. Paul parks close after sundown. So we would make sure there's adequate lighting at the edges of the park and look to apply for grants if it becomes identified that more lighting is needed in the interior.
I want to acknowledge that there are a lot of great comments in the meeting chat, but since we are towards the end of the meeting, I want to give people a chance to turn on their mics and videos and ask questions directly of Liz or make comments. So if people want to raise their hand, we can try and do this in an orderly way, and I can call on people as we move along. But we will address the other comments in the chat. We are seeing them and definitely appreciate the conversation here tonight. But I do want to give everyone an opportunity to use their voice and speak up about their thoughts and comments on this plan. So if for those of you not familiar with Teams, you should see a little hand in the upper right corner of your screen. You can turn that on or click on it.
I see 2 questions and 3 hands raised.
Okay. Let's see, Rennie.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes. I wanted to echo one of the messages that were that was in the chat, and that is to to be attentive to and incorporate wherever is possible Native American names and Native American landmarks that might be on this site. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that comment. We can try to look into what significant areas are nearby and reference them. I think that's a very meaningful thing, and we need to do it carefully and sensitively. So that would probably involve consultation with local tribes just to make sure we're doing this in the best way possible and making sure we honor the correct people.
Looks like Rick Beeson has his hand up. Rick, do you have a comment or question?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Liz, for the presentation. I put in the chat room the issue about whether completion of the trailhead is going to require a dedicated bike lane over 280, knowing that 280 is going to undergo planning and redesign and reconstruction. Can the trailhead be improved in the meantime? And then secondly, is there any sense of what the trailhead cost is going to look like up to 280? And then third, I just would sort of put out there that in sort of a district level, we have, this is more of a programming for the park, but the bank has got a sea of parking there that, you know, even though cars won't be able to go east on Myrtle, east of the park on Myrtle, there'll be parking available for events. And our neighbors to the east, the Case building, also got a pavilion. It really sets up for an interesting event area. And we just want to sort of mention that we are open to those conversations for post-construction.
Yeah, those are great questions, Rick. Thank you. And it shows that you know a fair amount about the area. You're clearly knowledgeable about a lot of the area planning, and thank you. We have done very high level estimating about the trail property that the city owns, but to fully connect over to Wabash Avenue and over 280, we are waiting for other pieces to fall into place, namely MnDOT finishing their study of I-94. And also there's a parcel of land near the storage facility that the city doesn't own that would be blocking us from connecting through there. So that's part of our chasing down a DNR grant. And that's an item that we want to talk more about in the future as we know more, but we don't have a lot of definite answers for you yet. In terms of the trailhead, we are looking to see what we can do with making that eastern connection toward Sunrise Bank and that kind of sea of parking lot that you referenced. And we need to check on if there are any easements or any property ownership issues that could slow down that process of connecting. But we are looking into it in the background. And then in terms of costs, yeah, we've done a high level cost for the trail implementation on the parcel on the pieces of land that we do own. And that's why we are pursuing grant funding and why we will look into additional funding, because we don't have enough funding currently to build out that trail. Does that answer most of your questions? I think the last piece you had mentioned was programming and parking, and I appreciate the idea of looking at the district as a whole for parking and access. But we treat this park, or the St. Paul Parks and Rec would define this park as more of a neighborhood park, and we would expect most people coming here to be walking from the nearby area. So typically we don't do much in terms of studying parking supply because we, assume it's a neighborhood park.
Liz, I'm sorry, Joyce Lyon, do you want to ask your question?
This is about the art, because I'm delighted to, I'm an artist. I'm delighted to see that it's programmed in. I wonder if it can't serve more than one purpose, that it might be, you talked about having it reference the history, which is good.
Yes.
But it also might be educational in terms of talking about maybe the Dakota history, or it could provide information, and it could be interactive. So it's not only taking space, but it's providing activity for people who are in the park.
I love that vision, and thank you for sharing that. I think that's the kind of feedback we're hoping to get. I think you understood that what I showed on the screen is not prescriptive in what we are saying will be here. It's just an idea. So we're open to that, and we just need to make sure we balance our objectives with the art, with the funding that we have available to do it.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Betty has a question or has her hand up.
Thank you for calling on me. I really strongly urge incorporating an infiltration gallery. I think that would be a tremendous asset, and it will help handle a lot of stormwater, considering that an awful lot of the surrounding areas are impermeable surfaces, hard surfaces. This would be really helpful to have good stormwater control from here.
Yeah, that's a great comment, and I think we're hearing stormwater from a number of people on this call. I think it's something we can consider. There's various best management practices, including tree trenches that can be a linear feature and hold water and also support better tree health that we could look at. I'm not quite familiar with an infiltration gallery, but I can look up what that might be. But we will definitely consider stormwater, and we're proposing to do that at this time in phase 2. But if we hear a lot of feedback that people think it needs to be considered in the first round of construction, we need to balance that out with the timeline of trying to deliver a park later this year.
I'm not seeing any new hands up, so sorry, there's an echo. I'm going to go back to some of the questions in the chat. But if someone else has something they'd like to make a comment on or have a question, raise your hand and we'll come back to you.
That sounds great. And everybody, thank you for your thoughtful questions so far.
We have touched on acknowledging the Indigenous history of this area. That's come up in a number of comments, and one suggestion to acknowledge it in the art, and as well as some other ideas such as consulting with Dakota elders to reveal a name for design. So those are all great comments that we'll take back with us. And if you have additional comments, please write them in the survey. There is a question about whether or not bathrooms or portable bathroom facilities will be included. Liz, could you touch on that, please?
Yes. So in our apologies, there seems to be a slight echo, but it seems to have gone away. Thank you. When we put a bathroom into our parks, it typically costs about $200,000 to $250,000 to do the whole structure and all the plumbing. So at this time, we feel that with all the other things we can add in this park and all the other amenities we can accommodate, that a bathroom would mean that we can't do most of this vision. And so I think a bathroom would be a great item to save for a later phase or for future fundraising. And so it's not proposed in this this round of construction at this time.
There's a comment about since 2017, people have been asking for climbable boulders or logs. It's come up at many of the meetings. The natural wood structures at Nokomis are mentioned. Nature play would be a cheaper way to add in active structures and get supplies from local areas. So that's more of a comment than a question. There's another question. Can we get an ADA curb cut from Sunrise Bank's parking lot to Myrtle so people can enter from the east?
That's definitely something we can study. We'll definitely need to look at ownership and easements to make sure that that is feasible, especially when you're connecting to another property. You have to make sure that everybody's on the same page before you build it. So we will look into that and communicate back to the district council and update the website when we know more about the feasibility of that. But yes, it's something we would like to do, assuming that it's able to be done.
This would be a pedestrian curb cut, presumably, or a bike curb cut?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
It looks like Matt Pravratsky has his hand up. Would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
Hi, yeah, I'm Matt Pravratsky, the legislative aide in the Ward 4 City Council office. I just wanted to thanks to the park staff for putting this together. I think every iteration of the process shows kind of how many different conversations inform the version we see now, and it was frankly just really interesting to see how those changed over time. But this was maybe one of the most interesting mixes of folks in terms of like St. Anthony Park conversations that I've seen. A lot of folks I didn't recognize, which is a really good thing. And then plenty of folks I did, like Sharon and Catherine and everybody. So good to see everyone. I just really especially love the connection to the trail and how this will be kind of bigger than a sum of its parts. The fact that we're amplifying that. And Rick, I really appreciate you mentioning that Sunrise is willing to be sort of a ongoing partner if there is big programming here. And if we do need that space, even to Sherm's question about that sort of festival street concept, I think the fact that Sunrise is really open to conversation and partnership could also mean that, food, like a bunch of food trucks could be on the western edge of the Sunrise parking lot and be something if we shut down that section of street for a weekend event or something. There's just a lot of cool possibility. And so even seeing the final rendering, I was just looking at it, getting excited because it just seems like a really cool possibility. So I just wanted to make sure I thank the staff for all that work, and obviously a ton of community energy and passion went into this too. That was really clear. So, thanks everyone for coming, and just wanted to make sure we let you know we're excited about this to move forward, and getting it done this year would be amazing. So that's really cool.
Thank you, Matt.
Yes, thank you, Matt.
Do we have any new comments or questions from anyone? Liz, could you speak to the survey? How long? Okay, there you go. It's on the screen. That'll be open for 2 weeks. Can you, will you also send that out to the larger community, or what's your idea for that, Liz, if you could answer?
Yes, our plan is to take the list of people who signed in tonight and email you with a follow-up tomorrow morning, including a link to this presentation and a link to the survey. so that you'll be able to provide written comments. The survey is brief. I think there's a total of 10 questions, 5 of which are about who you are, so that if we need to track a little bit of data to make sure we're reaching the correct people, that it's that we have that kind of demographic and background data. And so the survey is mostly focused on the park at Westgate, asking about art, the playground, what your priorities are, and most of the information in those questions, it draws from feedback we've heard over the last couple of years, including ideas about wanting a pavilion or wanting various play structures out here, or wanting more of an emphasis on art. So we're asking you for your priorities so that we can have better direction in what we're emphasizing in what we finally build here later this year. And so again, we'll be sending out that survey link and a link to the presentation tomorrow to follow up.
And then Liz, Rennie also has his hand up.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Very quickly, I just wanted to say that link that you're going to be sending out, it would be very advantageous to send that to, and I'm sorry, do you hear this echo?
I do a little bit. I'm going to see if I can.
Stop it. One moment.
Okay.
Okay. What I suggest is that you send the link out, if you can, to managers at Dominion Apartments and also at Berry Street Apartments.
Sure.
And also there's another apartment across from Berry Street, Berry Apartments. And because you would get a lot of feedback. Many of the East African residents live in these buildings. I live in Berry Street Apartments, so I can attest to that. So I just want to send that out to. It would be great if you could send it to the management and they can put it on a newsletter, or get it out to residents so that they can input. Thanks.
Well, thank you. That's a great idea. We have contact with Ethan, I believe, at Legends at Berry and Millbury Apartments, and I can make sure that he reaches out to the rest of his staff as well. Hopefully this meeting invitation went out through the Millbury Apartments and Legends at Berry lists, but and I do also have a contact at Emerald Gardens. So if you have other contacts that you think may have been missed for this meeting, please email me. When I send out the information tomorrow, you'll have my email address. It's also, if you search stpaul.gov, stpaul.gov for Westgate, you should find the link to this project website, and my name and Anne's name are both on there for contacting us. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of great comments. I appreciate all of these suggestions of further places we can provide and solicit feedback. Anne, are you seeing any other comments that you feel we should address before we wrap up?
I'm still seeing the question of stormwater, building infrastructure to handle stormwater, especially in these early phases, that has come up a number of times. I believe we've touched on most everything else that I am seeing, but if someone feels like I'm missing or we're missing something, please raise your hand. But maybe, Liz, spend just a little more time discussing stormwater and the management plan again.
Somebody's saying several hands up. I think some of the hands that I'm seeing, at least right away, are people who have spoken. So if you feel like you've already shared your feedback, click on the hand again and it should take your hand down. And then that will help us filter out who remains and hasn't been called on yet. In terms of stormwater for this site, the indications we have right now are that it's pretty sandy and should be fairly well draining. But we will be doing soil borings and other testing to see and make sure that we have the right conditions to support the plants that we're proposing, the plant communities. We're definitely open to applying for more support through the Capital Region Watershed District or other local government partners. However, we do want to make sure we can get this first phase of the park built this year, and applying for additional grants could mean delaying the construction. So we need to balance that out. And I do believe there's a lot of opportunity along the trail to incorporate innovative stormwater features. And in terms of the grading or the topography, the trail is in a couple parts somewhat lower than the park, so water would flow that direction downhill. So we, at the city, we will read through your comments. We will do our best to find and the best way to apply what you're suggesting to the site. But for now, our intention and our plan is to go forward with this phase of construction, make this as sustainable and native plants, full of native plants as we can, and do something more innovative and partner with the Watershed District for the trail portion in the future. I'm seeing, can we remove the ugly fence along the east side of the park? We will work with Sunrise. I assume that they would be okay with it. We'll still need to find a way to screen the fencing around the cell phone tower, but as part of the trail construction, which will be in the future and can happen at a time once we've received the DNR grant that I was mentioning earlier, that's when the fence would come down. It probably needs to stay up for the interim until we have all of the agreements in place and the funding in place to take it down and then make it look good after it's down. I just saw a question pop up. Is there any Weyerhauser Foundation grant money available? I know that at one point in the past, Weyerhauser was approached potentially for donating money and having their name on this park. The reason their name is not attached to the suggestions of this park is because they declined. But if anybody has a connection with Weyerhauser and wants to have us pursue that again, either talk to Catherine at the district council or email me and we can see. But as far as I know, the Weyerhauser Foundation has declined so far to support. With that, I'm seeing a few more questions, and I think some of them are relating to stormwater. I'm not seeing any new hands coming up, so please take our survey and share your feedback. If there's something you feel is not addressed in the survey, you'll have my email tomorrow morning. So please let us know your thoughts. We do want to provide a park later this year, but also provide a park that serves what you need, what most of the residents need, and what the city can keep up going forward, what we can maintain. So thank you all for taking almost an hour and a half out of your night to be here with us and speak up for your neighborhood. And we will be following up over email. And if need be, we'll hold another meeting like this in the future. But for now, we're excited to bring this park to reality. We're excited that you care so much about it, that you're spending your night with us here. And we'll be in touch as more developments are, forthcoming. So thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm going to stop the recording.